There's a massive problem right now going on with the global supply chain, and it seems like nobody is talking about it. So I thought in this video it'd be the perfect opportunity to break down some of the challenges that these importers are facing, some of the reasons as to why we've led up to this current situation that we're in, and why the end consumer will end up paying for this, aka you. Nick here from Ways of Wealth. Thank you for tuning in. It's another market recap where we highlight key events that happen in the market over the past week. But before we hop into the video, I'd like to ask you a huge favor. If you learn something new or you get some value out of the video, hit that thumbs up button. It definitely helps me out and I would appreciate that. And if you haven't already, consider hitting that subscribe button, turning that notification bell on. We do this every single Sunday. First, let's talk a little bit about what I mean by supply chain. I'm not talking about going on Amazon, hitting that cash out button, and getting it delivered onto your doorstep the next day. This is way more intricate. Companies manufacture goods throughout the world. They happen to package them throughout the world and they need to get them to your final door. And I think a lot of people are naive about the process and they don't understand all the methods of shipping that really happen to get that product from where it's made to your doorstep. So when it comes to the international supply chain, we won't go into too much depth because there's a lot to cover. But there's really only two methods when it comes to moving something overseas. The first is via air freight. This happens to be a very, very costly solution. So a lot of companies use that as the last case scenario. The latter, the one that is moved most common, is via ocean freight. And that's where these companies pack up ocean containers and they move them on vessels that can house thousands and thousands of containers, and they move them from one country to another. From there, they're offloaded from the vessel and they're put on trucks or they're put on rails and they're moved to the closest distribution hubs. And this is where Amazon comes into play. To give you an understanding of how massive this is, the US imported $2.5 trillion worth of goods in 2019 alone. In that same year, there was 11 million containers that unloaded in the US. This is an absolutely integral part of the US economy, and there is a massive problem right now. To get an understanding of the problem, let's roll it back to March and see how we got to where we're at today. And obviously back in March, we were faced with the original lockdowns. Now, with those original lockdowns, we weren't able as a consumer to go out to restaurants. We weren't able to go and travel. So this really impacted the services industry, but we still had money to spend. So what we did with this money, we started looking around. We said, why don't we improve our home? So then from there, we saw people, spending money on furniture, on renovations. We saw people buying video games. I know Nintendo did really well. And obviously with the new platforms from PS5 and Xbox, those are flying off the shelf right now. It really shifted the consumer demand to the good side of the economy. And with that, it put extreme pressure on these companies that import goods because of obviously now all of this extra money that was going towards the services part of the economy was now being spent on hard goods. And they needed to get them over here and they needed to get them here as fast as possible. There was a lot of companies that learned that having inventory show up just in time was not going to cut it. In March and April, a lot of these companies were left with nothing to sell. and still having the effects of having things on back order that are making a lot of customers upset. So what they've done in the interim, if they started ordering more goods, this has also added on to the demand. And as we know, a quick economics lesson, as we add on to the demand, the supply decreases. And as there's less supply on the market, it makes it more valuable. This is driving up the cost of shipping. And that is probably the most important point so far, is that a lot of companies are paying 300% more in shipping than what they did this time last year. To add another curveball to the mix, it happens to be Chinese New Year in just a couple weeks. And if you're not familiar with that, it's where the whole country shuts down for 2 weeks, and where these workers that work on the coastal towns, in factories, in warehouses, they pack up, they go home to the mainland and spend time with their family. Now, with that being said, obviously the fact that they're going to be closing down for 2 weeks, they've been in a mad rush to pump product out, to get it ready to ship. But that rolls back to the problem that we have with absolutely no space on these vessels. There's absolutely nothing available for these companies to move their product. And we're 2 weeks away from Chinese New Year. Now, this happens to be an event that happens all the time, but I think it's been escalated this year because companies are loading up on inventory. There's this upward demand on goods in the North America and markets throughout the world. This isn't just a Far East to North America problem. This is through and through. Now, with all of the congestion and price increases and supply shortages, what does this mean? You mentioned earlier that this will affect me. What are you talking about? Well, if these customers are experiencing an increase in shipping costs, they'll really have two options. Now, the first option is that they pass on these costs to the end consumer. And this is where we can get into the discussion about inflation. I've mentioned it in videos in the past, is that inflation is coming. I didn't think it would be artificially created through the supply chain, but it looks to me that this is something that we should keep an eye out for. I think this is definitely a cause for concern, because I think that right now the supply chain is being constricted by obviously the supply shortage, but this is not increasing anytime soon. We've seen this backlog of containers that will continue after Chinese New Year. There's a bunch of containers that are still waiting to go, and they will still be waiting to go in a month from now. And I don't see this letting up anytime soon. So with this problem persisting past Chinese New Year, this kind of shortage supply of space on the vessels and increased demand for goods, I think is going to continue, especially since these retailers will start to focus on bringing in summer goods in that April to May period of time, so they can get it in and get it ready to ship to you. So we will see these supply shortages continue. That means that the increased prices will continue for a prolonged period of time, and obviously these companies will look to push that, that increased cost onto the end consumer. That means the goods that we know and love will continue to rise in price. And the second way that this could really affect us is that these companies will end up eating the cost of this extra shipping. Now, unlikely in my opinion, but if they do, where this could affect us is if we're investing in these companies. And what will eventually happen is that their margin will erode. They will make less and less money because they will have added cost. And with that, their earnings per share will definitely decrease. And when they report, quarter one and quarter two, we will not be happy with the results. I definitely see this problem persisting for at least another 6 to 12 months. These companies would have to source out other vendors in other countries. This takes a while, obviously going through the sample process and everything like that. But if China starts to see those export numbers declining, they might step in and put in some type of regulation when it comes to the shipping costs from China. Now, these are all what ifs, so I don't really know where it's going to go. But based on the situation that we face today, this supply shortage will continue. There's a lack of containers that are going back to China. Some of them are even going empty. This is affecting the North American export market because there are companies here that move product throughout the world. That happens to be a secondary issue. The first issue is that our economy is so reliant on importing goods, not only from China, obviously throughout the world, that if we continue to see the price of shipping increase, then this will take money out of our pockets, because there's no doubt in my mind that these companies here, these retailers, will push that final cost, that increased cost onto you and to me. Again, this wasn't one of the areas that I really saw leading to inflation, but as we do consume so many goods, this is definitely something that we should be watching out for. This is kind of reminiscent, reminding me of the period of stagflation, where we saw the price of oil increase, and obviously that affected all the goods that went with it, because obviously it's used in manufacturing and used in delivery, where the increased price of shipping might even cause us to have this stagflationary period, because there is a factor of what if the economy doesn't recover as fast as we think it's going to recover? So all of these retailers are left with an inventory that is priced way higher than they expected. And they're sitting here waiting on inventory that, us, the consumer, A, can't afford, and B, don't want. And it's all something that we should be keeping an eye on as we move forward, as we continue to go. It's an interesting topic that not many people talk about, but I thought I would bring it to the limelight, because I do think that this could be, one of the things that, potentially hurts us in the next 6 to 12 months. And that's all for this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed the video. Again, if you made it this far, you learned something new, hit the like button. It definitely helps me out. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, turn that notification bell on. We do this every single Sunday. I hope you all have a great week in the markets. Happy trading.